There we go.
Now it's working.
Yay.
Good.
And we can start. It's the right time. So have you read Esther before, Joanne?
Oh, I'm sure I have read
Yeah, I'm sure you have.
everything.
Yeah.
But it's been a long time probably.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, don't.
What about you,
Sure.
Janet?
I read it this morning.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. What did you think about it?
I'm a little confused. I understand that she's a powerful character and that she gets what she wants.
Yeah.
But the whole thing with the banquet and then unmasking the guy at the banquet is a little bit unclear to me.
Yeah. It may have seemed like the safest way to do it. So I have this outline for, I know everybody here has probably read this, and so, but we'll just review
That's
with
good.
the outline. So, King Asarius is the king in the story. First he calls Queen Vashti to present herself at a banquet. She refuses. And then the king bans Queen Vashti from being in his presence and make rules for all the women of the kingdom. So it wasn't just Vashti, but all the women. I thought it was funny because the scholar was saying, well, she didn't want to be in his presence anyway, so.
Oh, so that works out right, huh?
So he made a rule that she probably didn't care about. But
Wonder what she thought of Esther replacing her.
yeah, Esther replaces Vashti as queen. Mordecai exposes an assassination attempt on Asarius' life.
Oh.
Haman the Agagite is elevated to a seat of honor. Oh, here we go.
Yeah,
Were you able to read Esther? Pam?
I
No,
was,
that's okay.
I was,
This is the outline.
but I have some thoughts anyway.
Yeah, I wish
Always
we
like
could have
to
done
read
this in 3 classes because we could have read it and then
Yeah.
yeah.
But I haven't read it recently.
But I brought my Bible,
But okay.
I get my points.
We thank you for doing the kitchen duty.
Yeah,
Breakfast and all.
Really?
Do you need a Bible, Jenna?
I'm fine. thanks.
Okay.
She's probably got it memorized.
Yeah.
She's a smart girl.
So Mordecai refuses to kneel to Haman
To Haman.
for some reason. Haman plots to kill all the Jews because of Mordecai's behavior. The king sends out dispatches to all the provinces to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews. Then the king and Haman sit down. So if you notice, so Queen Vashti does something the king doesn't like, so then all the women suffer.
Oh my
And
goodness.
Mordecai does something Haman the Agagite doesn't like, and then all of the Jews suffer. Mordecai and Esther begin to work to save their people. Mordecai goes into deep mourning, and Esther sends out one of her attendants to find out why he's in mourning. Esther decides to go before the king, although it could mean death. Esther goes before the king and receives his favor. She requests that he and Haman attend the banquet hosted by her. He heartily agrees. Esther asks the king to attend a second banquet with Haman. Esther continues the work of saving her people alone. Haman plots with his family to have Mordecai hung. King Asarius reads in the annals that Mordecai had told him about men who were in a plot to kill him. He wants to honor Mordecai just as Haman comes in to talk with him about hanging Mordecai. Haman unwittingly tells the king how he should honor Mordecai, because what the king does is he says, I have someone I want to honor.
What should I do
what
for
should
this
I
marvelous
do?
man?
Yeah, and Haman goes, well, who else could it be but me? And so then he's like, well, you should do this, and this. And then the king goes, okay, that's what we're going to do for Mordecai. And Haman hates Mordecai, of course.
Oh.
Yeah.
Haman has no problem with ego.
Yeah, yes. So let's see what else. King Asarius and Haman go to the feast with Queen Esther, and she asks the king to save her people. She tells the king that Haman is responsible for her people being in danger. The king is furious, and for some reason he goes out into the garden. Haman stays to beg Queen Esther for his life, the queen returns from the garden and finds Haman on the couch with the queen. And King Azariah says, "Will he even violate the queen in my presence in my own house?" Haman is hung on the pole he had reserved for Mordecai. Sorry, I miswrote that. And then Mordecai replaces Haman, and Esther reverses Haman's edicts. There is rejoicing among the Jews, and a festival and a holiday is established. The Jews destroy their enemies, and then Purim is established.
Yep, they have a great time.
Feast of Purim.
Sounds like
Yeah.
a good plot for a movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Wasn't there something about silver tokens or money exchanging hands somewhere in there?
Yes, that's right. It was
I didn't
so
understand.
when Haman went to the king, he said, "I want to kill Mordecai and all of the Jews, and here I'll help you pay for this." And the king says, "Keep your money." So
Oh,
I haven't.
maybe that's what you're
Can't
talking
believe
about.
anyone would think the king would need money.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be insulted by having someone suggest that.
yeah.
Haman
He was
just wants
earnest
to
about it anyway. He wanted
He wants
to
to
kill.
make sure he gets his own way.
So any questions, was everything clear, or was there something that wasn't clear?
Oh, Janet had a question.
Yeah, the banquet strategy is not clear to me.
Right,
It was,
Oh, because, yeah. The king
because she does
and
too.
Haman both went to the banquet.
Yeah.
Because
She
Esther invited them, right?
she invited them to a first one, and then she goes, so she's like playing the king, I think. Like, she knows, throughout the story, he's like kind of off the wall, he just kind of willy-nilly all over the place. You don't know how to predict him. So she wants certainty, maybe, to like, okay, come to this banquet, and then, oh, can you come to a second banquet? And then he comes, and then it's like, okay, here's the deal.
Okay.
So that might have been what it was.
She was trying to save her people by getting to the king and maybe
Yeah.
helping,
yeah,
relating to him.
Yeah,
Is that why?
yeah.
I
Or
think,
that's what one scholar posits. That's what's
Okay.
going on. Yeah.
I think she wanted to make sure that he was looking at her.
Yeah.
She was
yeah.
the queen, and he doesn't have to call for her unless he wants to.
Right.
He's
Right.
too busy, he doesn't.
Yeah.
So I think she wanted to make sure he was focused on her. I am your queen, and these are my people,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you can't do this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it says Esther replaces Vashti as queen. Do they have some kind of ceremony, a marriage ceremony or something, I wonder? Maybe it doesn't say anything.
I can't remember if
About
they actually
that,
talked
like
about
we
the
do
marriage
today,
ceremony.
there's-
Do you?
Marriage ceremony.
It was pretty simple.
Yeah, it was.
He went out, his advisors advised him to get a new queen, this
But
gal won't
that's
act
all he
right.
had to do is go get her and bring her
Well,
home.
yeah, he's
So,
the king.
no, well, not
Yeah.
quite. Not quite. He said, so they said, why don't you get a new queen? And so he says, okay, and so they went out all around and hunted up all the pretty girls they could find.
Is that what they
Right,
did?
Yeah, and just swiped them
Okay.
and took them into the palace and
Right.
left them there for like a year, was it?
Yeah.
Being
Oh.
bathed in goat's milk and
Oh,
all this
right,
fancy
right,
Being
stuff.
as beautiful as they could be.
Right.
Yes, and
Exactly,
pouring perfume
yeah.
all over them so that it'd
Yeah.
suck into their
And that
pores
was
so they'd smell
after-
good regardless.
After he got rid of Vashti.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, I think she went into some kind of concubine hole,
Oh, okay.
but she was never called forth again.
we don't really know what happened to her, actually.
not
It doesn't-
exactly,
It
no.
doesn't say explicitly what happened
But he
to
couldn't
her.
put her out among the people because she had been
Yeah.
his.
I'm surprised he didn't kill her.
Yeah.
Well,
that's true.
He's probably too busy.
I was surprised that the Bible said they went out and got all the beautiful young virgins.
Oh,
Not just a bunch of beautiful young virgins, but all of them,
Right,
which
right,
I think
right.
is unreasonable.
Yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
only so many you can round up.
Right, exactly.
I think they went out more than once,
Hmm.
as
Oh.
well, at least in this one book. They went out more than once to get more. And then after their year was up, I don't know, they drew straws or something, and they were given permission to go into his treasure hall and pick whatever they wanted. I wanted to check and make sure that's in the Bible.
That's not in the Bible.
It was in the book anyway.
That must have been in
It did make a good story. And they could keep whatever they picked to wear that night when they came in before the king. And of course, some of these girls were, poor, beautiful but poor, and they were thinking about their families or whatever. And if they could keep it, so they just loaded themselves with all this crap. So he couldn't hardly see them, he just saw this stuff. And if they didn't suit him after that night, they were sent off to the concubine hall, and that was the end of them. They were in there for the rest of their life because they were a concubine, and it's quite possible a lot of them never got called on again.
Yeah,
They just
yeah.
rotted away their life in there.
Oh, wow.
In the book, I don't remember which one, because this is a great one to write books about.
Okay. Let's continue on with the Bible, Esther.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll try and be good. I didn't get a chance to look it up in here, but it seems like some of that was true.
Okay. So, this text was probably written around 200 to 400 BCE. Ahasuerus is a historical figure, and there is knowledge in the story of the Persian courts, but there are many factual inconsistencies which identify the text as historical fiction. For example, Vashti and Esther do not exist. We know who Ahasuerus' queen was, and she was actually kind of crazy. So
Really?
yeah, they were a pretty crazy royal family. So, but yeah. God is not in the Masoretic text. So the Masoretic text is something that was translated by rabbis over centuries, but God is not in this text in that one. And the Protestants get our text from the Masoretic text. So it's God's not in there either.
Okay, God.
So,
Okay.
yeah. And our version is regarded as canonical by both of our faith communities. Now, Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox include a version of Esther based on the Septuagint, which is a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible.
Has something at the 7.
Yeah,
Septuagint.
LXX.
I don't know.
Yeah. So, the Septuagint, or they call
here
it
is.
LXX, it's the earliest extant translation, Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. It was translated from the 2nd to the 3rd century BCE. There are additions to the text in the book of Esther in the Septuagint.
Now can I come back? Esther chapter 2:13.
Yes.
And thus came every maiden unto the king, whatsoever she desired was given to her, to go with her out of the house of women into the king's house. Doesn't say jewelry, but it does say whatever she
Okay.
wanted.
Okay.
In
I
the
was wrong.
evening she went, and on the morrow she returned into the second house of women, to the custody of Shaashgaz, the king's chamberlain, who kept the concubines.
The eunuch, wouldn't it?
Yeah. She came into the king no more, except the king delighted in her, and that she was called by name. So she was just stuck there. Now when it came turn for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her in for his daughter to go to the king, she required nothing but what Haggai, the king's chamberlain, the keeper of women, appointed. So she didn't go all gaga over all those jewels or crap or whatever it was that she could take. She didn't take it unless he said, take it.
Huh.
In the book, which is not in here, she takes the Star of David, which had been stolen from her house in a previous We Hate Jews deal. And that's all she wore. And again, it's still all she wore was just whatever this guy said wear.
Yeah, Esther was very smart.
Yeah,
The king.
and the king delighted in her, probably because his eyes weren't burnt out by all that crap she had on.
She must have been a beautiful lady.
Yeah, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight.
Okay, so I want to turn to Esther chapter 4 on page 450. So I want to read this. Why don't we go around and take a paragraph each? I'll start with, when Mordecai learned all that had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes, and went through the city wailing with a loud and bitter cry. He went up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one might enter the king's gate clothed with sackcloth.
Oh.
In every province, wherever the king's command and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting and weeping and lamenting, and most of them lay in sackcloth and ashes.
When Esther's maid and her eunuchs came and told her the queen was deeply distressed, she sent garments to clothe Mordecai, so that he might take off his sackcloth. But he would not accept them. Then Esther called for Hatach, one of the king's eunuchs, who had been appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what was happening and why. Hatach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her, and charge her to go to the king to make supplication to him and entreat him for her people.
Hatach went and told Esther that what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hatach and gave him a message from Mordecai, saying, "All the king's servants and all the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law. All alike are to be put to death. Only if the king holds out the golden scepter to someone may that person live. I myself have not been called to come into the king for 30 days. When they told Mordecai what Esther had said, Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, "Do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than any of the other Jews. For if you keep silence at such a time as this, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another quarter. But you and your father's family will perish. Who knows, perhaps you will come to royal dignity for just such a time as this. Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for just such a time as this." Then Esther said in reply to Mordecai, "Go gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days or night or day. I and my maids will also fast as you do. After that I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." Mordecai went away and did everything as Esther ordered him.
It's kind of interesting how Esther becomes really strong really fast. Like, okay, you go do this. We're going to do this.
She was leading,
Yes.
a leader all of a sudden.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that in the Septuagint, there's this addition to chapter 4, and I didn't put the whole thing because it's kind of long, but there's a prayer from Mordecai, and this is just part of it. He said, "O Lord, Lord, you rule as king over all kings, for the universe is in your power, and there is no one who can oppose you when it is your will to save Israel. For you have made heaven and earth and every wonderful thing under heaven. You are Lord of all, and there is no one who can resist you, the Lord. You know all things. You know, O Lord, that it is not in insolence or pride or for any love of glory that I did this, and refused to bow down to this proud Haman. For I would have been willing to kiss the soles of his feet to save Israel. But I did this so that I might not set human glory above the glory of God, and I will not bow down to anyone but you, for who are my Lord, and I will not do these things.
Wow.
So the Septuagint was not comfortable with the fact that God wasn't in there, and they weren't comfortable with the fact that we have no idea why Mordecai did what he did. Like, this text doesn't tell us why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like Daniel and the lions did, wasn't he supposed to bow down to the king, and he says, there's no king but God? And
To that statue, yeah.
No, he didn't do it.
yeah, right, and he ended up with the lions.
Right,
It
right.
was
The lions weren't hungry.
Okay, and then so after Mordecai's prayer, then in the Septuagint, Esther has a prayer.
Oh.
Then Queen Esther, seized with deadly anxiety, although you don't see that here, she seems to be very strong, but the Septuagint is like, she was just really anxious, fled to the Lord. She took off her splendid apparel and put on the garments of distress and mourning, and instead of costly perfumes, she covered her head with ashes and dung,
Yeah.
and she utterly humbled her body. Every part that she loved to adorn, she covered with her tangled hair.
Oh my goodness.
She prayed to
Was
the
that long hair, huh?
She prayed to the Lord God of Israel and said, "Oh my Lord, you are our King. Help me. Who am I alone? And I have no helper but you, for my danger is at my hand. You know my necessity, that I abhor the sign of my proud position, which is upon my head on days when I appear in public. I abhor it like a filthy rag, and I do not wear it on the days when I am not in leisure, or when I am at leisure. And your servant has not eaten at Haman's table, and I have not honored the king's feast or drunk the wine of libations. Your servant has had no joy since the day that I was brought here until now, except in you, O Lord, God of Abraham. O God, whose might is over all, hear the voice of the despairing, and save us from the hands of evildoers, and save me from my fear." What do you think about that?
It's a good prayer.
Versus what we see in here.
Well, we don't, what we see in our version doesn't have anything about her not being happy in,
Right,
in
exactly.
her situation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
These would have been Jews who were settled in Greek lands who translated this text.
Yeah,
So
that's
they,
interesting too.
Yeah, yeah. So they had sort of, they were bringing
Put
their
their
own
own
sort of
meaning.
theology
Yeah.
into it. Yeah. So now let's read
Where are we?
5.
Do you want me to read the first paragraph, or? That's a long paragraph, but I can do it if you want me to.
Well, you read last.
No, I didn't.
Oh,
I
who
did.
read last? Okay, yeah, you could if you wanted, or you could do half of it and Pam could do the other half.
Okay, I'll stop someplace in the middle. Let's
Okay.
see, how many verses is it? It's 8 verses. Anyway, I'll read a bit.
Okay.
This is chapter 5 of Esther 6. The 6th chapters,
We're on the 5th.
Esther 2. Esther
Oh.
2. No,
We're on
is that?
chapter 5,
What do
Chapter
I
5?
have? Yeah,
On page 451.
yeah, I have it, but
Yeah.
451.
what, it just says Esther, but it doesn't say anything more about it. 222. I don't get what all these numbers
We're on
mean
page
up here.
451.
I have it, so I'll read a little bit of chapter 5.
Okay.
On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, opposite the king's hall, or the king's hall, I should say. The king was sitting on his royal throne inside the palace, opposite the entrance to the palace. As soon as the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won his favor, and he held out to her the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther approached and touched the top of the scepter. The king said to her, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request?" "It shall be given you, even to the half of my kingdom." Then Esther said, "If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to a banquet that I have prepared for the king." So that's half of that
Okay.
long chapter. I can keep going if you want.
So Pam, do you want to start at 5?
Okay? This is King James.
Okay.
Then
Is
the
that
king
King
said,
James?
"Cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther hath said." She's just invited him to the banquet. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, "What is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? Even to the half of the kingdom it shall be performed." Then answered Esther and said, "My petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king hath said." Then went Haman forth that day joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai at the king's gate, that he stood not up nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh his wife. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches and the multitude of his children, braggart, and all these things wherein the king had
Which we all do.
promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and servants of the king. Haman said, "Moreover, yea, Esther, the queen, did not let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared, but myself. And tomorrow I am invited unto her also with the king."
Yet all this does me no good, as long as I see the Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate. Then his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, "Let a gallows 50 cubits high be made, and in the morning tell the king to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go with the king to the banquet in good spirits." This advice pleased Haman, and he had the gallows made.
Nice good.
That's assuming the king will just say, "Yeah, sure, fine."
Yeah, exactly. So here's the way they changed it in the Septuagint. So on the third day, when she ended her prayer, she took off the garments in which she had worshipped and arrayed herself in splendid attire. Then majestically adorned, after invoking the aid of the all-seeing God and Savior, she took 2 maids with her. On one she leaned gently for support, while the other followed, carrying her train. She was radiant with perfect beauty, and she looked happy, as if beloved, but her heart was frozen with fear. When she had gone through all the doors, she stood before the king. He was seated on his royal throne, clothed in the full array of his majesty, all covered with gold and precious stones. He was most terrifying. Lifting his face, flushed with splendor, he looked at her in fierce anger. The queen faltered and turned pale and faint, and collapsed on the head of the maid who went in front of her. Then God changed the spirit of the king to gentleness, and in alarm he sprang from his throne and took her in his arms until she came to herself. He comforted her with soothing words and said to her, "What is it, Esther? I am your husband. Take courage. You shall not die, for our law applies only to our subjects. Come near." Then he raised the golden scepter and touched her neck with it. He embraced her and said, "Speak to me." She said to him, "I saw you, my lord, like an angel of God, and my heart was shaken with fear at your glory. For you are wonderful, my lord, and your countenance is full of grace." And while she was speaking, she fainted and fell.
Oh my goodness.
Melodrama!
Whoa.
Hear the organ!
And then the king was agitated, and all his servants tried to comfort her. That one's hilarious.
That's great.
It reminds me of like a 20s silent film.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All kinds of actions
Yeah.
going on here.
And the girl is weak and faint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she
so-
hadn't eaten for 3 days, so
Now,
that's
there you go.
kind of fair.
Yeah. So there's a huge difference between these
There
two
was,
telling
yeah.
of the stories.
I have a little trouble following it here.
Yeah. Okay, so I have some questions here.
Oh.
We can go over. There's a ton of them. We don't have to go through all of them.
Oh, here's the question.
Yeah. So what do you read into Vashti's refusal to appear before the king as he commanded? Why was the reaction of the king and his henchmen so overblown?
He was a king. You don't say no to him.
Yeah.
So
grandmother.
Vashti was the king's wife, or was that?
Yes,
one?
she
Okay,
was the one at
was the one of,
She was the one at the very beginning who the king wanted her to come, and he wanted her to be a trophy wife, and he wanted to show her off to his friends.
okay.
She said, "No, I'm not coming."
Okay.
And so he went to his advisors. So there is one scholar. So Esther is really more important to Jews than it is to Christians. Some of us don't even read it. We don't read it in the lectionary.
No,
We don't.
we
Yeah,
don't,
yeah.
do we?
So yeah,
I don't
it's
remember it before.
but they celebrate Purim every year, and they read Esther every year.
Yeah.
So
I think
yeah,
there's people at Laurel Park that do that. and
exactly.
They have their Jewish customs and.
Yeah, exactly. So, and one scholar that I read said that this was more like burlesque. Like this story is more burlesque. It's a comedy, really. It's kind of it's over the top. Persia didn't have 127 provinces. They had like 27 or something. It's and the reactions of the king and the people are really, really over the top.
And
So
and the women's status.
yeah, yeah.
What-
Well, I think
Are they good, or are they high, or are they low? Low, aren't they?
I mean,
I would guess, but I don't know.
yeah. I mean, women were kind of property, really.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
time, so
Like they are in a lot of places.
yeah, yeah.
And even in the US today, I think.
But why do you think she refused to appear before the king? Was she a feminist, do you think?
Could be.
Yeah,
It may have been her self-esteem, like I'm not gonna be shown off,
Yeah,
like just
yeah.
for my body.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, after 5 days, they were all pretty soused.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She didn't really wanna,
Right.
in the book, he asked her to appear naked.
Yeah, that's also in the Talmud, rabbis talk about that. That's what he was asking in this. So yeah,
Because he was
So
pretty
it's-
soused.
I'll
Yeah.
have to ask them.
yeah.
And he wanted everybody to be jealous and think, oh, how
Oh.
wonderful the king is, that he's got this
He's
wonderful.
the king, he can do what he wants.
Exactly.
And have who he wants.
Exactly.
That is true. It could have been dangerous to go in there with a bunch of drunk men. So, yeah.
We don't know anything else about her,
Right,
how she,
right,
even if she was from high people or low people or,
She was an orphan, wasn't she?
Vashti.
was an orphan.
Vashti?
Esther
Are we
was
talking about Esther or
Esther.
Vashti?
Vashti. Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. Esther was an orphan, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, we don't know a whole lot about Vashti. We just hear her in that first chapter, and then she disappears.
My grandfather had a black maid taking care of him in his old age, and her name was Vashti.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
right.
So,
Oh.
Okay.
so maybe the black community
Yeah, yeah.
wouldn't think you want to honor her. Or maybe you do, for having the strength to
And that was
disobey
a,
the king.
that was a common name maybe, or it was a
Was it?
name that the mother picked out for.
Right. So what does the story so far say about the status of women in ancient Persia?
Mhm. They were less than the men were at the
Yeah, yeah.
doesn't really say a whole lot, except that the queens had to act at the command of the king.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's probably men and women in general. would you
Right, but
think?
it doesn't really say that.
No, but you can guess.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can.
And we have to put a lot of our own guessing in a lot of the scripture.
And in the part where it says they went out and rounded up all the beautiful young virgins, you know, it doesn't say that these young virgins had any say in it, you know,
Right,
they were
exactly.
just
How did they
drafted.
know, what I
Right.
wanna know is how did they know they were virgins?
I think
Yeah.
it was the assumed status, you know, if
Right.
they were living in their father's house and they were unmarried, it was assumed that they were virgins.
They were assumed, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so they may or may not have been virgins,
yeah.
who knows?
Well, their parents weren't consulted either.
That's
Apparently
true.
Yeah.
They were
That's
just
true.
taken.
Yeah,
The
That's
king
true.
says.
Yeah, yeah,
okay,
that's true.
you have to go, lady. Daughter.
I wonder if the king paid them, or
Yeah.
it doesn't really say that
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
Like, did he
In
give the
his
families
riches.
some,
No, I
yeah,
don't think so.
benefit?
I thought it was,
But she was off their hands, and she had a home for life.
That's true.
yeah, I don't think they valued their children maybe as much, and I think it was probably an honor. when
Yeah,
David was
exactly.
viewed as-
Yeah.
That's what I
in
would,
the
that's
king's
what
court.
thought I had.
Yeah.
I don't need this.
So does it bother you that Esther seemed to be trying to gain the king's favor even during this forced conscription of young women by the king?
Yeah.
Why or why not?
That kind of bothers me. But it's human nature,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think, for
Yeah.
some women, some women, not all women, but
Yeah,
some
yeah.
women.
yeah,
And there's a competition among the women, who was the fairest of them all. and
Right,
they was I, and
Exactly.
a lot of adoration from her friends.
but it's also survival because
Yes.
you're gonna go in, you're just taken
Mhm.
into this palace with the king.
Well, and her only way out was up,
Yeah.
because
yeah.
otherwise she would never see the outside world anymore.
Right, right. And, what was I gonna say? I can't remember now. So what do you think Esther's reasons were for sending clothing to Mordecai? Why did he refuse it?
Now, again, how does, I have to read
Oh,
these.
sorry.
Mordecai relate to Esther again.
So Mordecai was her
Uncle,
cousin,
uncle.
uncle? Okay. And,
So he was a relationship to her.
he was a relation to
And
her.
he, of course, she cared for him
Yeah,
and
yeah,
his well-being.
yeah,
He kind of adopted her when
yeah,
she didn't
yeah.
have parents.
She was also kept in the dark, so she wouldn't know why he was in sackcloth. She
yeah.
knew what sackcloth meant, but she had
Yeah,
no clue.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because remember, she didn't know about the law that said all the Jews are going to be killed on such and such a day. She had to be informed by
Yeah,
one of the eunuchs or somebody.
maybe she was embarrassed, one of the members of the family was not looking well-dressed.
Yeah, and yeah.
Somebody's
Yeah, that
husband
too.
or son or somebody,
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
don't be
yeah,
embarrassed to me,
yeah.
get some good clothes.
Yes.
Why do you think she sent the clothes?
I think that she understood that he was in distress from that behavior, and she wanted him to not be in distress. She wanted to fix it.
Oh, yeah.
And his
yeah.
behavior was that he wasn't dressed appropriately.
Well, he was dressed in a way that told everybody he was suffering.
He was,
He was in mourning.
Yeah,
That's
That's
mourning.
right.
Yeah.
Mourning
Yeah.
clothes of sackcloth.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We don't do that anymore, but there are signs of mourning around us all the
Sure,
time.
sure. Yeah. We just mourn differently.
some of the, I don't know if the current popes do that, but back through sometimes they would put on sackcloth and then put their nice robe over the top so that nobody would know they were in mourning.
Oh, really?
Oh, interesting.
Because they didn't want anybody else to feel bad, but they felt bad.
But they were still feeling that themselves.
Yeah, sackcloth doesn't let you forget you're in mourning.
Broadcasting it.
Yeah.
It's
yeah,
not
yeah.
comfortable.
Yeah, well, we do that today, I think.
Yeah.
Especially with the dome, and they say she was dressed in dome.
Yeah,
Over the top.
Yep. Sheep ship.
So why did he refuse the clothing?
Because that's how Jews are taught to act when they are mourning, especially if it, to show to God that they are
Yeah,
humble and under this, but they don't like it a bit.
yeah.
Well,
He kind of sent word back to her too that, so look, I'm doing this because of this, so she had more of an explanation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, though God is never mentioned in the book of Esther, 4:14, and we can read that again, does carry an air of divine intervention. Do you think the writer intended this? So 4:14 is, for if you keep silence at such a time as this, relief and deliverance will rise from the Jews from another quarter, but you and your father's family will perish. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for just such a time as this. Do you think it implies some divine intent?
Isn't there something way back in the beginning of the Old Testament, kind of one of God's rules or whatever, that if you don't step up, somebody else will be in your place, but you're a dirtball? I think there is.
Okay.
And John or somebody also says if you don't
well, this is
tell people, a millstone will be tied around your neck and you will go into the sea, but other people will step
Okay.
forward and do this, but you're going to be toast.
Yeah. So does that mean you think that this is divine reference to the divine?
It's certainly reference to the rules that the Jews knew.
Yeah.
So, I'm probably getting all confused here.
That's okay. I can,
Where was Persia where is Persia in all of this?
oh, I
Is
didn't
this
get
where
a,
they are?
I didn't get a
No.
map. Yeah, they're supposed to be in Persia.
That's when, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm at the right time in the right place and not from our church service today that we had.
Right, right.
Okay.
Which is Iran today, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right. Okay. So Persians were Jewish people at that time anyway.
No. The
King wasn't.
Jews, so Mordecai and Esther, at least we get that they were taken there from one of the, let me see, what does it say? Well, they were taken there after their country was invaded by another country. I think it was Babylon. So that's how they ended up there.
So there's a whole bunch of places
Yeah.
mentioned here in the first chapter, 1 to 4.
Here we go. Now there was a Jew in the citadel of Susa, whose name was Mordecai, son of Jair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjamite. Kish had been carried away from Israel among the captives, carried away with King Jeconiah of Judah, whom King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon had carried away. So they were in refugee status in Persia, so,
Okay.
yeah,
And the king was the king of
Persia,
Persia.
yeah,
Okay. Because they talk a lot about the king, but
yeah,
I didn't read exactly what he was king of.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And he
So-
was a real king, historically, he is a real king,
Mhm.
but the story is historical fiction, so it's not a real story.
Are you sure?
Uh-huh.
Because,
I mean,
they still celebrate Purim, so,
Yeah.
right. That doesn't mean they believe it really happened. But it's, there's enough historical inaccuracies in Esther to say that this is historical fiction. So,
Kind of a
because
parable.
the queen, there is no such person as Vashti or Esther. We know who the queen of Assyrius was. And she was kind of crazy. And the royal family was kind of a mess.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah. The facts are more crazy than
Yeah.
the story is actually.
And they probably have historical accounts that's not part of the Bible. That
Right,
goes
yeah,
down that
yeah,
far, that
yeah.
you can check out some of this.
Right,
Maybe not
exactly.
everything.
Yeah.
Well, in the Inspire book club we talked about how the Jews tend to elaborate or extend a family kind of in their own version of what might have been or what they would
Exactly,
like to be. I mean, the
Yes.
number of people killed kind of grew
Right.
and
Oh,
Right.
is that
what did
right?
they call that?
Like Noah. So Noah was a story from another
yeah.
culture,
Uh-huh,
but the
yeah.
Jews took it, the Israelites took it and recreated it for their own
Oh, is that
purposes
right?
with their own God and how
Probably other stories
it
too
makes
then.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and
Oh,
that does
that's
happen a lot throughout Hebrew scripture,
Sure,
and
Yeah.
the names for gods too.
Oh, yeah.
Like El
Uh-huh.
was a god
Mhm.
in Ugarit,
Mhm.
so like a head god. So they borrowed stories, names,
Names.
but I bet that was true of a lot of cultures because they were so close together.
Yeah,
So
right.
yeah. They don't know where Yahweh came from though. They don't know
Oh,
where
don't
that
they?
name comes from.
Oh, that's
No.
interesting.
It is, yeah. They don't know where Shaddai comes from either.
Oh, should
So,
I?
yeah,
Oh, that's interesting.
yeah. So, in this, in 4, and we see a sudden change in Esther's attitude to the world around her as she prepares to go against the prevailing
Mhm.
forces and norms. When in your life have you had to make such a sudden change? Why did you do it? What was the outcome? Have you ever had an experience of having to make a sudden change?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I was in nursing, if you want to know. I was in nurses training right out of high school because that's what I wanted to be. My aunt was a nurse. I really looked up to her. That's what I just always wanted to do. Well, while I was at OHSU and I got married in the meantime because I had to do some Portland State work before then, and I met my husband, and that was the
Yeah.
goal. And anyway, we were married, and I was working up at the OHSU, and the patient that I was in charge of fell out of bed after my tour duty was like, because I had given the nurse after me, or she continued, but somehow he fell out of bed. Well, he sued me. The family
Oh, my
did, not
goodness.
him, because he was very badly hurt, I guess. And they sued the hospital, and somehow that was the end of my career.
Oh.
I'll bet it would be.
Oh.
It was, so I went
Because you
on.
didn't put up the bed rail, or they thought it was your fault that he decided to roll the wrong way?
I don't know why he fell out right now.
Yeah.
People can be ridiculous.
But I was on duty before this other nurse came on, or the.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You
that
should have
was-
known.
Yeah.
But I didn't.
Of course not.
So,
We do crazy
you kind of
things
had to
anyway.
change your,
So I had to
whatever,
change everything,
your
yeah.
direction, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was told by the head nurse of the student nurses, I guess it was. We had quite a talk. My husband was in on it too, my new husband. Anyway, that was the end of my
Oh,
nursing career.
I'm sorry.
And musician.
Well, later on in life, after I had 3 kids, I went back to school because I started playing for church. I think it was at St. Matthew. I was asked to start playing the organ. So,
Nice.
yeah, if you want to know all of this.
Do you, how do you look at that? Looking back, how do you look at that?
That was
Like,
the right thing for me to do. I should have
Yeah.
done it right out of high school, but
oh, yeah.
because I had piano lessons all the way through,
Yeah,
from
yeah,
5 years old up through high school.
yeah, yeah.
But anyway, at this one time then. So I thought, well, I can play the organ pretty good, but I sure don't know a whole lot of mental knowledge
Right.
about the organ, about music in general. And
Yeah,
so I went
yeah,
back to school and got my degree,
yeah,
crazy
yeah.
degree. A Bachelor of Science in Organ Performance. Can you ever imagine the degree like that?
Oh, cool. Cool. Well,
Because I can apply my science.
yeah. My bachelor's was a Bachelor of Science in Comparative Religious Studies.
Oh, is
But-
it really? Yeah.
When you got the Bachelor of Arts, you had to have language. So, and I
Yeah.
had language,
Me too.
but it would be faster just to take a couple of computer classes and
Oh.
then get a bachelor degree. So,
Yeah.
but yeah.
We
so I
do what
had
we
that.
can do to get what we want, don't we?
Exactly.
Do what we need.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anybody else have a story that you can think of that you want to share?
Well, as a nurse, you were working with organs, and you still are.
That's
so-
true.
That's a good way to put it. Thank you. Thank you, Pam. Oh, my goodness.
Okay, do you prefer the story with or without the Greek additions?
I love the Greek editions.
Oh, cool.
Those are cool.
Some of them.
Well, I like the idea of the prayers, to tie it
Yeah, yeah.
into our faith,
Yeah,
but it seems to take away from the strength of Esther.
yeah, I agree.
Kept fainting,
Yeah,
collapsing.
exactly. I really don't like the
That one was a
D,
little over the top.
where she faints twice and
Oh,
I really liked the story from the Masoretic text where she's strong. And she
strong
just-
and,
yeah,
yeah. She knew what
The
she
prayers
was
are cool,
supposed to do.
except for Esther's prayer is also kind of weak, like weak woman sort of prayer.
Yeah.
So they could have changed that prayer, but yeah.
The king was agitated evidently.
Yes,
Was that when she fainted? Because she fainted, is that the thing?
I guess so.
Right before here. Well, she was talking to him, evidently, to the king.
I find it interesting that, why was he so angry when she showed up? When later on he says that only applies to our subjects. So
Right.
she could have come in at any time, so why was he so mad when
Right,
she showed
right.
up?
Yeah. Maybe he reversed what the law was. He's like, oh no. Doesn't apply to you, don't worry. I don't know.
Maybe it was just you're bugging me. Why did you come in to bug me?
Yeah, right. Well, and he's not angry in the Masoretic text. He even seems happy to see her. Like, oh,
That's what I
Hi,
thought.
Esther.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
he liked her, I guess.
Yeah. It's
Later
interesting
on.
because the first queen refuses to come, and then Esther goes when she's not supposed to. But
What a surprise.
yeah.
It's also interesting that, was it Salome she's told the same thing. You danced so nice, I'll give you half my kingdom.
Yeah,
It seems to be what they did.
right.
Kind of stupid because.
Or maybe in biblical text, that's what that seems.
That's sort of.
Yeah. That's what the king would do, give you half of his kingdom.
But did he ever do that for a man? A man would take advantage of it.
Or say that to him.
And yeah, fry the king right out of place. But
Right.
of course the women would never do that.
They wouldn't ask for that, but maybe the
Right.
men would.
I think so.
I think Esther might have, if she had the opportunity.
Yeah.
She was strong.
Yeah, she
She knew what
was.
she wanted.
Yeah.
But she would never have been allowed to control it because women weren't allowed to control.
Right.
So she would have had to.
She was trying to tell the king what she would like him to do without being overly
Right.
Right.
ambitious
Right.
about it or something.
Yeah.
Right. And she wants to break it to him gently.
Okay.
So have you ever had to deal with someone that came in with an ego so fragile it cannot survive any challenge, real or imagined?
Oh, yeah, we have several of those at Beaverton Lodge.
Yeah.
I just generally try to avoid them. Sometimes I'll confront them and say, what are you in my business here? Strong characters.
Yes.
Actually, it's a weak ego.
Yep, there's somebody that I'm dealing with. I don't deal with them anyway.
Yeah. So it's
Somebody
like
calls
avoid
me
those
every
sorts of
day.
people.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think I live with one.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
If I say the wrong thing, he's just.
well,
Oh.
but he gets over it after a while. You see
That
the-
particular soft spot remains soft. And if I get
and you
into
know
that,
it, then
yeah.
you know what not to say or do because
But-
of that. Maybe,
You just want to
That's hard.
get with it. I'm not,
yeah.
Yeah. You're walking on
I think
eggshells
we
all
all
the
do
time.
Yes.
some people that.
Yes.
And that's part of our life, and
Yeah.
how we deal with it is how God gives us the courage and the knowledge and
Right.
this, or to deal with those things, I think.
Yeah.
At least I pray for that every day.
Yes. Me too.
Yeah.
So there is much coincidence. Esther had to show much courage in her dealings with Haman. Has there been a time in your life when you felt like Esther must have felt? Have you ever felt like Haman?
Probably both of them. Different times. I forgot how she dealt with him.
She buttered him up.
She did. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I don't do that.
So whose decision was for him to be killed on a spike? And I couldn't understand about the hanging, if he's killed on a spike.
No, they're one or the other, but you can't be both.
Yeah,
I
that's a
saw a
good
picture
question.
somewhere, I don't know.
You
the
can hang him and then spike him.
Maybe they didn't do that at this time, maybe it was hanging. I don't know. I don't really want to know about,
No, we don't care, do
about
we
those
really?
sorts of executions
Yeah,
too
it was
much, so I don't need
execution,
to know.
however they did it.
But leave that for somebody who has a real interest in what that is.
Let them,
The history
let the
of
movie
that.
people decide
Yeah.
that. So how did Haman feel? So how have we felt?
He was
with Haman?
pretty
How does he?
Arrogant,
Okay, well,
yeah,
I
and pretty
hope
full
I
of
don't, I
himself.
hope I don't be, I'm not
You're not
arrogant.
arrogant.
Well, I hope not.
I don't see you as a Haman at all.
There's times when sometimes I need to be though. We need
Of
to
course,
be.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a difference between arrogance and confidence and,
Yeah,
being able to stand up for yourself and set
that's
boundaries.
right. And there's times
But,
when we need
yeah,
to do that.
yeah. I hope I've never
Well,
Felt like
if you're
Haman.
a wife and mother, which I know you are,
Yeah, yeah,
you learn how to deal with it.
yes, yes,
And then when you're our age, my age anyway,
yeah,
it's easier to deal with that kind of people that
Right,
are
right.
around.
yeah,
I think even now, Hamanish behavior is still more on men because women are still stepped on.
yeah,
So we don't, you know,
yeah.
I would say yes, but maybe not always women
Not
to
always.
women. There's two ladies out
well,
there I
yeah,
live and I
that's true too.
try to stay away from them anymore. Just let them be who they are.
There are some women who can be pretty
Yeah.
narcissistic, so, yeah, yeah,
Both of them have gotten very criticized me for not putting my chair into the table or not keeping up with the exercise lead or not being able to sit at a table
Right.
because, oh no, you can sit here, it's going to be
That's my
filled."
spot.
No,
yeah,
it's going to be filled. It was an empty spot. Because
Yeah.
when we go down to breakfast, it's probably you too, Fran.
yeah,
You sit at an empty spot in the
Yeah,
table.
right, right.
Yeah.
No reserved seats, theoretically.
yeah.
You
Well, but like Lutherans, you know, if you're sitting in my spot in the pew, that's the
Well-
spot I'm used to.
I don't see much of that here. I've
I
been
don't think so either.
visiting a Presbyterian church, and the woman said, "This is my pew." I had to get up and move somewhere else. That was the last time we went there. We were trying out churches. Someone came up and was kind of apologetic for her.
Yeah, and they're not always apologetic where I am. I mean, the two women, they're like, Anyway, I started to sit down. I thought, oh, I'll just try this again. There were, I think, there was at least one extra place. All set, ready to sit down, and the dishes were there, the silverware and napkins were all ready. So I was starting to sit down, and this one lady just was gonna leave. I said, oh no, I'll go someplace else. Because she's the one that had told me I couldn't sit there another time, so.
Yeah, yeah.
Huh.
So it is new.
What is-
So we
Did you
went- we
notice
went
who
over-
sat there eventually?
Yeah, it was another lady, and people sit at the same places.
Yeah.
Isn't that, and it's here too,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The same people sit at the same pews, and
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's what I would do, would watch and see who the acceptable lady was and why.
well,
You
there's.
So any more comments or thoughts about Esther?
No, it was an
No.
interesting study, though. I wouldn't
That was a
gotten that
good
much out of
study,
it.
and
Thank
we
you.
can relate it to us, can't we?
Yeah,
To our
yeah,
lives.
yeah.